CO panics when the system crashes. Then a janitor's kid walks in and shocks everyone. The fluorescent hum of the Virion Technologies building usually drowned out everything. Every morning, just before the first wave of polished shoes clicked through the lobby, Alara, 30s, a janitor, moved through the pristine corridors. Her presence was as much a part of the building's infrastructure as the polished chrome and the humming servers, yet she was largely unseen. Her uniform, a simple charcoal gray, blended with the shadows, a deliberate choice or perhaps just a cruel trick of corporate lighting. Alara's world, though, was anything but gray. While her hands worked with efficient, practiced movements, wiping down glass walls that reflected the city's indifferent sky, meticulously vacuuming acres of plush carpet, her mind soared. It wasn't just a quiet demeanor. It was a profound stillness, a deep well of observation. She didn't just see dust motes dancing in the morning light. She saw the subtle shimmer of heat from a server rack that was running too hot, the almost imperceptible flicker in the vast data visualization screens that hinted at a latent fault. These were details no one else noticed or cared to notice because they weren't part of the system. Her routine was a carefully choreographed dance of physical labor and mental mapping, an unspoken dialogue with the silent, intricate machinery that powered Virion. Each sweep of her mop, each click of her keys on the automated cleaning cart, was a rhythm in her private symphony of understanding. It was a routine pregnant with the anticipation of disruption, a calm before an inevitable storm only she seemed to sense. Virion Technologies wasn't just a company. It was a monument to human ambition, a shimmering monolith of glass and steel piercing the urban sprawl. Its reception area, a cavernous expanse of minimalist design, spoke of untouchable perfection. Digital art installations pulsed on colossal screens, displaying intricate algorithms and abstract data flows, a constant, visual reminder of the digital dominion Virion commanded. Yet, beneath this veneer of cutting-edge brilliance, there was an inherent blindness. This was a realm where value was meticulously quantified, where human potential was measured by degrees and certifications, leaving no room for the quiet genius that blossomed outside conventional frameworks. The sheer scale of Virion, its overwhelming presence, seemed designed to subtly diminish anyone who didn't fit its mold, casting a long, impersonal shadow over those who operated at its periphery. Despite the corporate oversight, Alara's exceptional acumen flickered, subtle but undeniable. One Tuesday, while emptying recycling bins from the executive floor, she paused by a bank of servers. A low, irregular thrum vibrated through the floor, a sound that wouldn't register for anyone else. But Alara knew its cadence was off, like a heart skipping a beat. Without breaking stride, she adjusted a loose power cable on one of the server racks, a movement so quick and unassuming it could easily be dismissed as an accidental brush. Later that day, the IT department would marvel at a sudden, inexplicable improvement in server stability, a minor anomaly attributed to routine maintenance. Another time, noticing a peculiar, repetitive pattern in the discarded printouts from the data analysis department, a subtle alignment of certain symbols she'd seen only in obscure programming forums. She quietly made a mental note, filing it away. She didn't understand why, not yet, but her mind instinctively recognized the anomaly. These weren't overt acts of brilliance. They were fleeting glimpses into a mind that processed the world not just as a janitor, but as an unseen architect, constantly debugging the hidden systems of reality. The morning had started like any other at Virion, a symphony of purpose and controlled chaos. Then it shattered. A low, guttural growl emanated from the server rooms, quickly escalating into a cacophony of alarms. Screens flickered, then went black. Lights pulsed erratically, casting grotesque shadows across the panicked faces of employees. The once pristine digital art installations in the lobby pixelated into distorted, monstrous forms before dying completely. This wasn't a glitch. It was an assault. Panic ripped through the building like a virus. The hushed efficiency of Virion gave way to a primal roar of fear. Phones went dead. Network connections vanished. The entire digital nervous system of the company, the very core of its existence, was severed in an instant. People screamed. Some simply froze, their faces pale with disbelief. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of ozone and the palpable dread of utter helplessness. Virion, the titan of tech, was on its knees. The physical environment mirrored the digital collapse. Elevators shuddered to a halt, security doors jammed, trapping staff within increasingly claustrophobic confines. A cold, creeping realization settled over everyone. They were isolated, vulnerable, and completely exposed. The sheer abruptness of the shift left no room for rational thought, only instinctual, raw terror. The experts were a blur of frantic motion, their every move broadcasting a growing despair. Dr. Eris Thorne, Virion's head of cybersecurity, a man whose reputation preceded him like a halo, barked orders into a dead comm system. His team, a collection of highly credentialed engineers with enough certifications to wallpaper a small apartment, hunched over dark terminals, their fingers flying across unresponsive keyboards. Run diagnostics. Check the firewalls. Where's the intrusion detection report? Thorne's voice was hoarse, laced with a desperation he rarely, if ever, allowed to show. Their efforts were a frantic ballet of futility. Every protocol they deployed, every standard operating procedure they activated, met a digital brick wall. The malware wasn't just a breach. It was a ghost in the machine, shifting, adapting, mocking their conventional tools. Their faces, etched with exhaustion and incomprehension, reflected their growing frustration. They were brilliant, yes, but their brilliance was confined to the known, the predictable. This attack was neither. It was an enigma, defying categorization, mocking their rigid frameworks. Each failed attempt chipped away at their confidence, exposing the fragile edifice of their expertise. They were trying to catch smoke with a net, meticulously following procedures that simply didn't apply. The solution, if one existed, lay far outside their well-worn paths, a fact that slowly, agonizingly, began to dawn on them. Amidst the spiraling chaos, Elara remained an anchor of improbable calm. While others sprinted, shouted, or stared blankly at dead screens, she moved with a quiet, almost meditative grace. She continued her rounds, albeit with a heightened sense of awareness. Her cleaning cart became her mobile observation post. She didn't need a monitor to see the systemic collapse. She felt it. The rhythm of the building had changed. The ambient hum of data transfer was gone, replaced by the grating silence of digital death. Her eyes, however, weren't fixed on the panicked faces, but on the subtle clues that went unnoticed by the professionals. The precise timing of the network failures, the odd, almost artistic way certain digital displays had glitched before dying. It wasn't information she was receiving through conventional channels. It was a deeper, intuitive processing. She saw patterns in the way the emergency lights pulsed, a subtle synchronicity that hinted at a deeper, organized attack rather than a random malfunction. She didn't react with panic. She absorbed, analyzed, and synthesized. While Thorne and his team wrestled with unresponsive code, Elara was, in her mind's eye, constructing a precise, three-dimensional model of the breach, a unique internal blueprint of the unfolding disaster. Her stillness, her profound clarity amidst the escalating madness, was a stark, almost unsettling contrast. It was the calm of a surgeon before an impossible operation, a deep internal dialogue with the very essence of the fractured system. The executive boardroom, usually a bastion of cool confidence, was a pressure cooker of despair. Dr. Thorne, sweat beading on his forehead, slammed a fist on the polished mahogany table. It's a zero-day exploit, pure and simple. We're blind, deaf, and dumb. The collective groan that followed was thick with resignation. It was then, from the periphery, that Elara spoke. Her voice, usually soft, was amplified by the sudden silence. It's not just an exploit, sir. It's a conversation. The attacker isn't just breaking in. They're talking to the system. You're trying to block a door when the real problem is the language being used. A ripple of condescending murmurs spread through the room. A junior engineer, barely out of university, snickered. A conversation? What? Is the system having tea with the hacker, ma'am? Thorne, turning, saw Elara in her charcoal uniform, a bucket and mop leaning forgotten by the door. His frustration, already at breaking point, curdled into irritation. "And you are?" "Alara," she replied, her gaze unwavering. "I clean the servers every night. I hear them breathe." A scoff from a senior network architect cut through the tension. "Hear them breathe?" "With all due respect, Alara, this is a highly sophisticated cyber attack, not a broken faucet. We're talking about billions in losses, global data integrity at stake. We don't have time for poetic interpretations." The dismissal was sharp, infused with a palpable sense of injustice. The implication was clear. Her words, her presence, were an affront to their collective, expensive education. Just as Thorne was about to issue a sharp rebuke, a voice cut across the room, softer but firm. "Wait!" The voice belonged to Anna Reed, 50s, Virion's chief operating officer. She was a woman of quiet authority, known for her sharp intellect and an uncanny ability to see beyond the obvious. She had been watching Alara, her brow furrowed in thought. "What do you mean, language?" Anna asked, her gaze fixed on Alara, a subtle flicker of curiosity in her eyes. "Explain." Alara hesitated for a moment, then, finding an unexpected ally, continued. "It's like someone speaking in a dialect the system understands perfectly, but our firewalls, our protocols, they only understand the official language. The attack isn't a brute force. It's an invitation to a different kind of logic. A recursive encryption, maybe, built on a self-modifying cipher. It shifts its own keys as it moves, like a living thing." Anna's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. Thorne and his team exchanged bewildered glances. This wasn't jargon they knew. But Anna saw something else. A spark of genuine insight, a willingness to look at the problem from an entirely different angle. It was a nascent belief, a fragile glimmer of hope in the suffocating darkness of their failure. "Let her try," Anna stated, her voice resonating with an uncharacteristic resolve. Thorne's jaw tightened. He looked from Anna to Alara, then back to the dead screens. "Anna, with all due respect, she's a janitor. We have the best minds in the world, and the best minds in the world are failing heiress," Anna interjected, her tone leaving no room for argument. "What do we have to lose?" "This is not an act of trust, Alara," she clarified, her gaze returning to the janitor. "This is a desperate gamble. A Hail Mary. Do you understand?" Alara simply nodded, her expression serene. The air in the room thickened with reluctant acceptance. A path cleared for her to the main control terminal, a beast of a machine with multiple monitors, now inert. The atmosphere was charged with hushed, watchful reactions. Dozens of eyes, heavy with skepticism, followed her every step. This wasn't a moment of empowerment. It was a last-ditch, almost humiliating resort. The collective thought was almost audible. What could she possibly do? Alara sat down at the terminal. Her hands, calloused from years of physical labor, moved with a surprising delicacy across the keyboard. She didn't type. She seemed to feel the machine, her fingers dancing with an innate understanding. She eschewed the diagnostic tools, the intricate graphical interfaces that Thorne's team had been fruitlessly attempting to manipulate. Instead, she opened a raw command line, a stark black screen with a single blinking cursor. She began to type, not in bursts, but with a fluid, almost melodic rhythm. Her commands were unconventional, esoteric. She wasn't fighting the system. She was engaging it, speaking its unique language. She bypassed firewalls not by brute force, but by weaving intricate, almost poetic lines of code that seemed to mimic the very recursion she described. It was less about breaking through and more about finding a forgotten backdoor, a hidden conversation protocol that only a true polyglot of code could access. There was a raw, technical artistry in her movements, a profound communion between human and machine that transcended all traditional training. It was a symphony of instinct and interface, a profound demonstration of an innate, deep-seated command. A hushed gasp rippled through the room. On one of the auxiliary monitors, a green line, thin but undeniable, appeared. Then another. Data began to flow. slow at first, then picking up speed. Dr. Thorne, who had been leaning back with his arms crossed, scoffing silently, now leaned forward, his eyes wide. His face, initially etched with disbelief, began to transform. The experts started murmuring. Is that a reverse trace? No, it's too clean, too elegant. Their initial, entrenched skepticism was dissolving, replaced by a profound sense of awe. Alara wasn't just fixing it. She was unraveling it, dissecting the attack with surgical precision. The atmosphere in the room underwent a seismic shift. The air, once heavy with despair, now crackled with an almost reverent silence. Faces that had been tight with tension now hung slack with astonishment. The turning point was undeniable. A major server, previously offline, suddenly pulsed with life, its status indicator glowing a solid green. A collective, stunned exhale filled the room. Dr. Thorne, the great cybersecurity guru, felt a profound humility wash over him. He had dismissed her, ridiculed her, yet here she was, effortlessly navigating the very digital labyrinth that had defeated him and his entire team. The paradigm had shifted. The janitor, the unseen architect, was not just fixing their problem. She was redefining their understanding of genius itself. Alara's fingers, still dancing across the keyboard, paused. Not because she hit a wall, but because she recognized a whisper in the code. Deep within the malicious software, past layers of obfuscation and sophisticated encryption, she found it, a digital signature. It wasn't a standard hacker's tag or a generic piece of code. This was an embedded fractal pattern, an intricate, almost whimsical spiral that pulsed subtly with the malware's core functions. It was a stylistic flourish, an artistic declaration hidden within lines of destructive logic. A shiver traced its way down Alara's spine, a complex cocktail of awe, fascination, and profound trepidation. She knew this pattern, not from any textbook or cybersecurity course, but from the margins of her own notebooks, from the designs she'd idly sketched on dusty windows, from the intricate knots she'd tie when lost in thought. It was a signature born of a particular way of thinking, a non-linear, intuitive approach to problem-solving. Her breath caught in her throat. The familiarity was unsettling, an intimate echo from an unknown sender. This wasn't just code. It was a voice, chillingly resonant with her own internal language. The discovery sparked a significant internal conflict. How could something so beautiful be so destructive? The profound revelation hit Alara like a physical blow. The attacker wasn't some faceless, corporate espionage agent or a nation-state actor. They were an individual. More than that, they were an individual who thought like her, saw patterns like her, perhaps even felt code like her. "It's a mind like my own," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the restored hum of the servers. This wasn't just a technical breach. It was a deeply personal message, a distorted reflection in the digital mirror. The insidious effectiveness of the attack suddenly made terrifying sense. The recursive encryption, the self-modifying cipher, the ability to effortlessly bypass Virion's most robust defenses, all of it stemmed from a brilliance that mirrored her own, a raw, self-taught genius that operated outside established norms. This wasn't just a cybercriminal. This was another unseen architect, one who had chosen a path of demolition rather than construction. It was a solemn, deeply unsettling insight, providing the chilling explanation for the attack's insidious effectiveness. The true enemy wasn't an organization. It was a singular intellect, a haunting parallel. Alara grappled with the profound implications. The razor-thin line separating creation from destruction had never seemed so starkly defined. Here was a talent, perhaps honed in solitude and obscurity, twisted into a weapon. Her own quiet brilliance, the same ability that allowed her to intuit system flaws and see hidden connections, could, in another context, be wielded for malice. It was an existential inquiry. What separated her constructive impulse from this destructive one? Was it circumstance, choice, or something deeper, more inherent? She thought of the years she had spent, unnoticed, observing, learning, building her intricate mental models of how systems worked. Had the attacker done the same, but with a growing bitterness, a festering resentment at being overlooked, undervalued? The thought filled her with a complex mix of sorrow and understanding. This wasn't just about fixing a system. It was about understanding a shared human experience of unrecognized potential and the vastly different paths it could take. This internal turmoil was vital context, shaping her intricate moral and existential dilemma. Across the room, Elijah Vance, 60s, the CEO of Virion Technologies, watched Alara. His initial detached skepticism, a mask of controlled composure he'd worn for decades, had begun to crack the moment the first green line appeared on the screen. Now, as Alara muttered about a mind like my own, a profound personal transformation began to unfold within him. Elijah Vance was a man built on logic and empirical data. He had ascended to the pinnacle of the tech world by valuing efficiency, measurable outcomes, and conventional brilliance. But Alara's actions defied all his established frameworks. Her approach was intuitive, almost spiritual in its connection to the technology. As she effortlessly navigated the compromised system, a long-suppressed memory flickered to life in Elijah's mind. He saw a younger version of himself, hunched over a workbench in a dusty garage, coaxing life into salvaged electronics. He remembered the feeling of raw creation, the intuitive leaps, the moments of sheer, unadulterated passion for understanding how things worked. This was before the suits, before the boardrooms, before the relentless pursuit of profit had hardened him into the analytical machine he had become. He remembered being dismissed once by an established professor who couldn't grasp his unconventional approach to circuit design. Witnessing Alara, an outsider, an unseen architect, just like he had once been, operating with such pure, unadulterated genius, was like looking into a distorted mirror of his own past. His cold, analytical facade softened, replaced by a powerful, introspective journey. The crisis wasn't just about Virion's survival anymore. It was about Elijah Vance's reckoning with his own forgotten self and the profound value of recognizing talent beyond the glossy surface. A collective gasp, then a roar of triumph, erupted in the control room. The Virion network, after agonizing hours of silence, flickered back to vibrant life. Screens blazed with data, servers hummed with renewed vigor, and the digital art installations in the lobby reanimated, displaying swirling, triumphant patterns. High fives were exchanged, cheers echoed through the once stifling air, and the palpable wave of relief was almost overwhelming. But in the midst of this celebratory cacophony, Elijah Vance, the CEO, remained remarkably still. He wasn't cheering, wasn't exchanging jubilant glances. His eyes were fixed on Alara, who was now quietly closing out her command line, her task complete. A profound understatement permeated his reaction. His transformation wasn't external, a boisterous celebration. It was an internal, seismic shift. His face, once a mask of executive composure, now held a complex tapestry of awe, humility, and a burgeoning sense of profound insight. The system's rebirth was a triumph, yes, but for Elijah, it was merely the prelude to a deeper reckoning. Elijah retreated to his sprawling office, the city lights a distant blur beyond his panoramic window. He didn't turn on his usual news feeds or financial reports. Instead, he pulled up an archived video from the company's early days, a dusty digital file he hadn't accessed in decades. It was a grainy recording of a young Elijah Vance, hair disheveled, eyes bright with an almost manic passion, presenting his nascent idea for Virion to a panel of skeptical investors. He saw his younger self, brimming with unconventional ideas, trying to explain his intuitive grasp of networked systems in a language the suits didn't quite understand. He remembered the feeling of being dismissed, of having his ingenuity undervalued because it didn't fit their preconceived notions of what talent looked like. Then, he fast-forwarded to a more recent clip, a short, unremarkable security footage segment of Alara. He watched her move through the pristine Virion corridors in the early hours, a quiet, almost invisible presence. He saw her on that Tuesday morning, pausing by the server rack, her hand a fleeting shadow as she adjusted the loose cable. He saw the subtle tilt of her head as she picked up a discarded printout, her eyes scanning for a moment, absorbing. The connection forged itself with visceral force. Alara wasn't just a janitor who fixed a problem. She was a reflection of his own forgotten genesis. Her quiet brilliance, born of observation and an innate understanding of systems, mirrored his own early, unpolished genius. He realized, with a jolt that resonated deep within his core, that he had built an empire that, in its relentless pursuit of conventional success, had systematically overlooked and undervalued the very kind of talent that had founded it. The authentic meaning of value wasn't solely in credentials or pedigree. It was in the profound, intuitive understanding that Alara possessed. This was his reckoning, a powerful personal epiphany about neglected talent. The formal summons for Alara arrived the next morning. Not an email, but a handwritten note from Anna Reed, delivered personally. The meeting was in Elijah's private, minimalist conference room, usually reserved for high-stakes mergers. The setting was intentionally designed to be disarming. The polished chrome and glass softened by natural light streaming in from the city skyline. Elijah sat opposite Alara, no intimidating desk between them. He offered her coffee, not asking a secretary to fetch it, but pouring it himself. "Alara," he began, his voice surprisingly gentle. "Tell me, how did you do it?" Alara didn't launch into a technical dissertation. She spoke slowly, choosing her words carefully, her gaze direct. "It's like, the system has a pulse, a heartbeat. Most people, they listen to the rhythm they're told it should have. But I hear the one it does have. The attack, it wasn't a disruption of the pulse. It was a foreign rhythm, introduced with such precision that it mirrored the system's own, just off-key, like a different language using the same alphabet." She continued, articulating her process not through dry technical jargon, but through her own intuitive, human language. "I saw the fractal signature, Mr. Vance. It was familiar, like looking at a pattern in a riverbed that you've seen in a cloud. It told me the attacker wasn't trying to break the rules. They were creating their own. So I didn't try to enforce our rules. I learned theirs. I spoke back in their dialect. I found the logic in the chaos." Elijah listened, mesmerized. It wasn't just words. It was a profound meeting of disparate minds, transcending conventional professional barriers. There was an inquisitive, open quality to their dialogue, a true exchange of understanding. A week later, under the guise of an employee welfare check, Elijah Vance made an unexpected visit. He drove his sleek electric car into a quiet, unassuming neighborhood, pulling up to a modest two-story house with a small, meticulously kept garden. Alara's home. She answered the door, a faint surprise on her face. Elijah, shedding his CEO persona, introduced himself simply. He saw the worn but cherished books on the shelves, many on forgotten programming languages and obscure mathematical theories. He saw a workbench in a small alcove, cluttered not with expensive gadgets, but with salvaged circuit boards, repurposed wires, and a soldering iron. This was where her genius was cultivated, not in sterile labs, but in the resourceful, organic manner born of necessity and genuine curiosity. He noticed a small, self-built server rack in a corner, fashioned from repurposed shelving units, humming softly. "What's this?" he asked, pointing. "My personal projects," Alara replied with a shy smile. "I experiment, learn. Sometimes, I try to build things that can help people in small ways. Like that irrigation system for the community garden down the street. Uses old smart meter tech to optimize water use." Elijah's eyes widened. He saw not just a humble abode, but a workshop of pure ingenuity. The simplicity of her life, the resourcefulness, the inherent drive to create and solve problems, stood in stark contrast to the opulent, often wasteful corporate world he inhabited. It was a profoundly revealing glimpse into the core of the protagonist, grounding his understanding of her capabilities. The visit fundamentally shifted Elijah's vision for Virion. Within months, monumental, sweeping changes began. He established the Unseen Architect Initiative, a new division dedicated to identifying and nurturing unconventional talent, regardless of background or formal qualifications. He greenlit projects that integrated human-centric algorithms, inspired by Alara's intuitive approach. The company culture began to shift, valuing curiosity and intrinsic problem-solving over rigid adherence to protocol. Alara, now formally titled Chief Systems Whisperer, found herself with a budget, a small team of curious minds, and the freedom to explore the human language of technology. She still wore comfortable, practical clothes, but now with a quiet confidence. One crisp autumn morning, as Elijah and Alara stood overlooking the bustling Virion campus, a campus that was now visibly, subtly, different, Elijah turned to her. "Alara," he said, a genuine smile on his face. "We've built something extraordinary here, something much more resilient than before." Alara looked out at the vast complex, then back at Elijah, her eyes holding a deep, reflective wisdom. She paused, then posed a question, not as a challenge, but as a quiet, defining query that encapsulated her very essence and Elijah's newly acquired, profound understanding. "But Mr. Vance," she began, her voice a soft, resonant echo. "Can a system truly thrive if it only listens to what it already knows?"